Okay, welcome to part 3 of my 3-part series, Dispatches from the Hermit Kingdom. My 3 very strange, crazy, interesting, and wonderful days in the DPRK. Parts Part 1 covered where I went, just the geography and a little history of the DPRK. Part 2 is what did I see. I provided an overview of a lot of the pictures, explained where I went, and some video so you can see exactly what I saw, for the most part, in the DPRK. And now part 3 is essentially, why the hell did I go, and what was I trying to accomplish? But, in a nutshell, I went to find out. It was an investigation for me. I wanted to see for myself what the DPRK was like. I did not want to take media representations for granted, and I'm lucky enough to be in a position where it was possible for me to do that, and I think in a safe way too. Now, that's not to say I was without an enormous amount of hesitation and an enormous amount of trepidation. I was scared pretty much shitless, especially the day I was going. And it didn't help anything that literally just hours before I was set to leave for the North Korean border, it was announced in the news that Otto Warmbler had died. He was the college student that had been arrested about a year or so ago down in Pyongyang when he tried to steal a propaganda poster from his hotel. He was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor, which is absolutely obscene. His father is now saying, by the way, that he thinks his son was within a coma within a day after he had been sentenced. So, which is very, very, very tragic. And so, just on a side note, I have discussed with Chris, the American that I introduced you to in part 2, what he thinks, why he thinks, or why did the North Koreans not release Otto sooner? If he was in a coma, I mean, maybe give it a few days, or maybe a week at most. If he's not coming out of a coma, you better just get rid of him. The last thing you want is to have a dead American on your hands. That would look even worse. So why hold him for 15 months? And what Chris reminded me of is the culture of face, and that the North Koreans were trying to save face by hoping against hope, obviously, that Otto would recover. Well, be that as it may, it really scared the crap out of me that he died right before I went. But nonetheless, I was at that point where I was already in my mind beyond the point of no return. I'd already made preparations. I was already mentally prepared. I was packed, and I couldn't sleep the night before, and I'd been up all night, just making sure that everybody had emergency contact information for me, or for the consulates and whatnot. Should anything happen to me. So at any rate, North Korea, this North Korean national flag. When we see this image, it's almost like a dog whistle to us with respect to the media, because we have been programmed to associate North Korea with nuclear weapons. Almost every image we see on television is the North Korean military marching through the square in Pyongyang. We rarely see anything else of North Korea unless it's images from the 90s, frankly, of the famine. So we see North Korea, we've been trained to view, and by we I mean primarily Americans, but I think it pretty much goes for any Western country, that North Korea is this big, evil, militarized country that doesn't feed its people and abuses them, murders them, and just is just an evil country led by a very evil dictator. And we get reminded of this too. Here's the North Korea travel warning, which goes on and on and on about how dangerous it is for Americans to go there, and Americans shouldn't travel there, and for what appear to be valid reasons. Now, I'm the kind of guy, and some of you may be the same way, that the more someone says no, the more you want to do something. I think it's analogous to why mountain climbers climb mountains, or people engage in risky sports, or go on adventure travel like this. It's because of the risk, the thrill. It's why we hop on Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point or ride roller coasters. It's the thrill. It's the danger. That's living life, and that's part of the. Frankly, as trite as that might sound, and perhaps it is, that's part of the reason why I wanted to go, is because it's crazy. So, and I'm known to be like that, I guess. But also, more importantly, is for information. I wanted to see for myself. I have the opportunity to go. I want to see for myself. Now, I did. I didn't go just at the drop of a hat or without doing a lot of research. I went with this company called Crahun. I don't know how you pronounce it exactly. It's a combination of various cities here in northeast China and Russia and DPRK to come up with that. I'll let you read about them. You can go on the About Us page, but Crahun.com is where you can go. This is the company that Chris owns and operates, and he's been taking foreigners, including Americans, into the DPRK for well over a decade now. Actually, I think since 1999. And he is based out of there. He lives there, which blew my mind, because you would never think in a million years, from all the imagery and all the stuff that we're told about how evil North Korea is, that the last place you would find an American living would be in the DPRK. And it's not just an American, it's several Americans, and that they own businesses and they operate there. That's mind-blowing to me. But that's also a crack in the facade. That's a crack in the myth that we have been given about North Korea, about how evil and crazy it is. If it's so evil and crazy, why do they allow Americans to live in there? Unmolested, frankly, unmolested. So there's a cognitive dissonance, to use the fancy terminology, between what we're told and what actually is going on on the ground in there. And again, the people I met, friendly, of course. I mean, it's a tour group. There was a lot of stuff that I did see there that wasn't friendly, as you recall from part 2, the picture in the school of the American POW, or the painting, I should say. Didn't like that at all. And I also found it kind of odd, a little indoctrination that there was a foreign national there. God bless him, he's doing a great job. But singing their national anthem, I don't know if Swedes back in his home would be happy with him doing that. But maybe Sweden and North Korea have a great relationship. I don't know. I haven't researched it. But I certainly would never do anything like that. But that stuff is trivial and meaningless, frankly, in the grand scheme of things. I suspected that North Korea was not as bad as everybody was letting on to. And the reason why I suspected that is a lot of the time that I've spent here in northeast China, I've spoken to a lot of Chinese. A lot of them are scared to go to North Korea, or they just don't have any interest in it. But for the predominant feeling that I get from the Chinese here is that they're not scared of North Korea. It's a troublesome, little brother, if you will. It has its problems, but it would be the way we look at Mexico. Americans don't look at Mexico as some crazy country that's all of a sudden going to start bombing us or doing some terrible things to us or to our citizens. That's the way basically North Korea is to China as Mexico is to America, is the best way I could put it. Which really changes a lot of stuff. And I know there's a lot of rhetoric, there's a lot of hateful words, but those are just words. And I know that North Korea launches missiles and stuff. Well, hell, so do we. I don't recall the last time, other than the Korean War, that North Korea invaded anywhere or bombed any other country. And sure, it's done some crazy shit, but so have we. But I don't want to be accused of making an illogical argument, and in the sense that I cannot justify the unjustified by saying, well, other people do it too. And this isn't to excuse anything that the Kim regime has done to its people, or not done for its people. It's probably a more accurate way to put it. But all I can tell you is this: that at the end of the day, there are people there, and the people that I met are hungry for knowledge. They want to learn, and they also want to share. They are respectful of us. They were respectful of me, as I showed respect for them as well. They are not part of some evil army bent on killing us. And frankly, despite the rhetoric that they receive day in and day out, I didn't get the impression that they viewed me or other Americans that they've encountered or other Americans that they work with there as part of some evil army that's bent on their destruction either. In other words, I think we know as a people when to call bullshit, and they call it too. And I'm calling bullshit out here as well, that a lot of the rhetoric that we have heard is just missing the mark, and missing the mark wide. North Korea is a third world country. North Korea has a lot of work to do, but North Korea is not some evil empire. North Korea, I think, has a lot to offer. It has a very strong, very educated workforce. A lot of them speak English. It has a very robust. It has a lot of robust natural resources. It is a very pristine country, a very beautiful country. It's a very fun country with casinos, although with respect to the casinos, they do need to get some American games, because I had no idea what the hell they were playing when I went into that casino. But they told me we don't get any Americans or Westerners, frankly, so that's why we don't have blackjack, or craps, or even a roulette wheel. I can't remember what kind of games that they had there. But at any rate, that's why I went. I went to learn, and I learned a lot. A lot of what I was told, was reinforced in terms of the poverty, and look, I saw a lot of it. Most of the people, the way they got around town was on bike or on foot, and the bikes were old, rickety, looked like Soviet-era bikes. But I also saw a lot of brand new taxis. There's a huge burgeoning taxi industry in Rasan, of all places. I saw more taxis in Rasan than I do in Ashtabula County, back where I live in Ohio. So it's, it was very, very, very enlightening trip. And yes, I do plan to go again. And yes, I would like to take people, anybody that's interested, to see what I've seen. And I'll just leave with this one interesting little tidbit, a little story. These two are basically the reason why, and I think I mentioned this in part 2, the reason why all tour groups, even though I was a tour group of 1, are assigned to guides. It's to keep the guides, they're basically a check on each other. Or if you wanted to be really cynical, you could say they were spies on each other to make sure that they didn't get too close to me and talk about things that they shouldn't be talking about. Well, as I told you before, Mr. Kim and I, when Miss Huang wasn't there, we had a long, interesting conversation about how the U.S. government works and the 3 branches of government, which he found just fascinating and floored him. It was mind-blowing to him. And it was fun for me to explain that to him. It was really interesting. On the last day of our trip, when we were having lunch, Ms. Huang and I just began, I can't remember how it came up, but we just started discussing philosophy. And I'd asked her about, what she had studied in school in terms of philosophy. I asked her if she studied philosophy in school, in college. She said, yes, of course. He said, "Oh, so I mean, you all you know all about like Plato and Aristotle and Socrates and all the ancient Greeks and da 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 da." Blank stare. What? Who are they? He said, "Well, you studied philosophy, correct? You didn't study the Greeks? Do you know what the term philosophy comes from? It's a Greek word. It means philos and sophos, lover of wisdom." She didn't know that either. So, well, what philosophy did you study? Excuse me. Well, Juche. It was just the Juche philosophy. And Juche is a philosophy, it basically means self-determination. And it's a philosophical outlook, I guess, for lack of a better term, that Kim Sung-il invented or allegedly invented. And it's the driving principle behind North Korea. Candidly, I really don't know what it is. That's how it's translated as self-determination. I've read a lot of books already that I bought there, allegedly written by the Kims about the Juche philosophy, and it's just a bunch of hyperbole without ever getting down to what exactly it is. So leaving that aside, then she asked me what other philosophy, well, what else is there to philosophy, giving me the impression that Juche was all the philosophy she knew about. So I don't know why I thought of Quine's Two Dogmas of Empiricism, which is a very arcane and difficult piece of Western philosophy written by this philosopher named Quine back in the 50s. And I won't go into it here. That's not the point. But it's a very difficult and abstract piece of philosophy. It's not like talking about Bentham or Kant or anybody else. Not that those guys aren't abstract too. But so, I explained to her essentially the problem of synonyms that he goes into in his paper, and the problem of meaning, essentially, is what he discusses in that paper. How, the problem of trying to determine how one word means another word, which can mean another word. And it's essentially, the way I understand it, and the way I've taught it, is it's the indeterminacy of language. That language can only get one so far in terms of meaning. And because science uses language and everything else uses language, therefore everything must be indeterminate to some degree. And whether I'm right or wrong on that doesn't matter. It blew her mind. She was sitting there like, oh my God, I didn't know there was other philosophies other than Juche. And what's a dogma? And what is empiricism? So we got all into that during lunch. And it was very interesting and fascinating to see her light up and giving her that tidbit rather than trying to preach to her about God or religion or politics and how our system of government is better and you need to rise up and just start something simple with philosophy and different ways of thinking, just thinking and opening up that the world is, just giving her a glimpse that the world was a little bit bigger and more robust than she realized. And I think that goes for all of us. So to kind of end this little tidbit, interesting story, Mr. Kim obviously was there at the table with us along with Slim Shady during this whole conversation. And once we finished up lunch, now we have to head back to the border, so we're walking out to the van to leave, and he takes her by the side, and I can tell they start speaking in earnest Korean, and I can tell he did not like the conversation and how deep we were getting, and it wasn't any romantic jealousy or anything like that, don't get me wrong, but I think that he thought that she was getting too close to me with in terms of the questions she was asking about what the words meant in dogma and empiricism and synonymity and analytic philosophy and all that stuff, which I thought was rather cute because he was doing the same shit earlier in the day when she wasn't around. But the point simply is they want to learn too. And I think that the more we expose ourselves to the North Koreans and frankly other countries as tourists and be good ambassadors and ask the right questions and provide the right information, the better the better relationships and the better the world can be, as silly as that might sound and high-minded. But that's ultimately why I went, is I wanted to understand North Korea. I wanted to test empirically what I had been led to believe against what I was hearing in China and against what my experiences would be in in North Korea, and it was a very interesting test. Some things were proven true, others no. And at the same time, I was able to provide them with information, and I think rather innocuous information, but important information about us, about Americans, and who we are, and what we believe in, and thinking, and philosophy, and education, and all that stuff. So, and they did the same, and I learned a lot just from speaking to them about North Korea. I didn't get too much into Juche and too much into their politics because, again, I didn't know how far to push the envelope. I rather would be the information provider than the information acquirer. Last thing I wanted to be was accused of being a spy. So, forgive me for my long-winded lecture here on why I went. Hopefully that answers, at least to some degree, the why. I do plan to go again. It's not for everybody. I'm not saying everybody should go, by the way. It is a third world country. There's a lot of restrictions. And look, not everybody likes Top Thrill Dragster. Some people like other types of roller coasters, or hell, you might not like roller coasters at all. And that's okay. But for those of you that do like roller coasters, come. This is a good trip. Thank you.